Good morning everyone. We are going to take a look at the Event Dispatcher code plugin in this video. Normally goes for around $8. Basically it's a blueprint to blueprint communication with event dispatchers without reference. These are other plugins that I've found on the marketplace that should be doing similar or if not the same thing. The one that I'm reviewing should be one of the cheapest, and this one was free, but I haven't tried it. I'm using Unreal 5.2 and the plugin version should be 1.6.6, and you have to enable it from the plugins like I just wrote. So the main nodes that are exposed to blueprints are the invoke and register events. You can just type event dispatcher, should get you all the nodes here. You can invoke means calling, register means listening to the event. Basically that's what event dispatchers are. You basically subscribe to an event and you get notified to when that event is called, and it has optional target and the event identifier, and there are basic input variables like flows, booleans, and if you want to get more complex, payloads. I'm going to get into that, but basically this is how you listen to the event. You register the event, make a custom event, and then you specify the event identifier, and then whenever it's called, whatever is connected to that custom event will execute. Now I said that this is blueprint to blueprint communication, but actually you can do a blueprint to widget or widget to blueprint communication along with game instance, game state, player state, game modes, and level blueprint. So it's not just limited to actor blueprints. Now pay attention to the top left for the print string that are getting executed from those set blueprints when I activate it through my input. Now like I said, you can use it for widgets also. Basically I have this text that I listen to the event from the event construct of the widget, and call this function, which basically increments a counter. Let's hook up the widget to the player character. Whenever I press 2 or the input that I specified, it gets incremented. So how are event identifiers made? You right click and then go to miscellaneous and then data assets, type event or event identifier, then select it. And now I'll type just for tutorial for this one, and basically that's it. You can select it from the drop down of the event identifier. And the event identifiers are not the only way. There's also, if you notice, there are name with every other type. That name basically is a string, so you can also register that by the string, and you don't need to have an event identifier, but you'll have to be careful because the name should be matching. And I'm gonna build this example. For this one I'm gonna make a bool event with the name. Why not? And this is not compatible. I have to make an event because this has the boolean input, and I'll connect the boolean input to there, and from the invoke I'll have to invoke boolean events. So you have to change both the invoke and the register, and they should be matching, and this should return false because I'm inputting false, and it does. Now you can debug some of the like to see which actors or how many actors are listening. However, this is not compatible with the event names. I don't know, for some reason it crashes my editor, so I'm just gonna use those with event identifiers. And let's look at the log. When I press it, you can see how many register events are there. The event identifier plus the type, whether it's boolean, float, or just simple. For this example, I'm gonna use these cones and cubes, so just static mesh component. They're both inheriting from actors, so they don't have special shared parent. They're just inheriting from actor. For this, I'm gonna set their location and just increase their height by the input amount or the float amount. And yeah, so we invoke the float event and input the value. I'm gonna say 100. When I play and press, each time I press, their position gets offset by 100 upwards. And that's the whole point. You don't need references or having special parent with the functionality. You can also unregister events. They're basically two unregister nodes. One of them is unregister event. You specify the identifier, and the other one is unregister events. So this time, when I press it, the first time it works, it gets offsetted, and then it doesn't because it gets unregistered. And I only apply the unregister to the cubes, but it works for both because it unregisters anything that's associated with the identifier. So that goes with the cones as well. As for unregistered events, it's basically for everything. It includes all of the identifiers and probably the event names. So that's why I wish a node with unregistered events with an optional target gets added. Sometimes you just want to unregister a specific actor. And speaking of optional target, you can use that to filter out the actors. For in this case, I'm getting all of the actors, for example, with the tag up, and for each of them, I'm gonna call or invoke the event. So in this case, you have to add the tag to some of the actors. So let's see, and yeah, it's an actor reference, so it doesn't create that hard of a reference. No problems there. So as you can see, only those with the tag are receiving the event. And there are many other ways to get a reference or filter out the actors using overlaps or line traces. And if you're wondering what is the difference if I just use getActorOfClass, well, getActorOfClass creates hard references. That's first. Second, you'll have to have a shared parent or use multiple getActorOfClasses to get what you want. In either case, this is a much better option. Talked about payloads earlier. Now I'm gonna go into details. First, you have to make an actor that's inheriting from payload object. I named mine tutorial payload. It's an object, so you can make variables here. First one is a bool. Second one, I'd say gameplay tag. Third one, yeah, vector should do it. I'm gonna choose a gameplay tag container, and I have to expose all of them and then make them instance editable for it to appear. And I'm gonna go into how they're called. You invoke the payload event, you select the identifier. There's also the one with the name, and you can see there's this payload. To get it, you have to first construct the payload, which is the payload object we made, and connect the payload value to the payload of the invoke, and select the inputs that you want from the construct payload. Here I'm gonna select eyes for the tag and the vector 35. Set the boolean to true. To register for it, just like others, just register payload event. But here when you make the event, you can see that it has this payload object, so there is no way around it. You have to cast to the payload object to get the variables. And if you say this creates a hard reference, it does, but it has a small footprint as long as you don't put hard reference variables in there. So be careful when you put things like static meshes or other reference, and make sure to set them to soft reference. Here I'm comparing the tag with the eyes with the water, so it should return false, and the input of the boolean is true. But yeah, I made a mistake. Yeah, it's a slight mistake. I forgot to add the actor position to the vector, or to just setting the actor position to 0, 35, 0. I'm just gonna delete those cubes and just make one large cube. I don't want the print string to be flooded. And you can see the cone moves each time I'm invoking it, and from the debug you can see this one has the payload type, and the true and false are returned as they should. Now I can reverse them, make the input false, and it does so as well. Now I'm correcting the tag. Everything works as it should. So to recap, this plugin lets you use event dispatchers to communicate between other blueprints without reference. Event dispatchers themselves are like subscription systems. For example, in YouTube, when you subscribe to a channel and that channel uploads a video, you get notified instead of you just searching for that channel periodically to see if they have uploaded a new video. And this is not just limited to blueprints. Like I showed, you can use it for UMG widgets basically, and level blueprints, player states, so almost anything, and even game instance. There are many register and invoke nodes depending on the type. Basically, some of them are just simple events, and some of the others have input like floats, vectors, booleans, and you have two types basically for each of them, using event identifiers, which are data assets, and the other one using names, strings. There's also a debug node that lets you see how many objects are listening to events and what type of events. It works until you use it with the string name, then that crashes the editor, at least it did for me. If you need more complex inputs other than the simple ones, you can use payload objects. This creates an hard reference to the payload object, but as long as you don't put hard reference inside it, it has a really small footprint in the memory, so it shouldn't create any problem. You can also filter out the object that you are trying to call or invoke the events to. You can also unregister events because this is not free. It does have a cost, but probably low, but still it's a cost, so you can unregister that. However, it doesn't have the optional target, so you cannot exclude individual. You basically can only exclude those that are listening to an event name or event identifier altogether, or you can just unregister everything. Hope I explained well enough for you guys to understand. Hope you have a good day.